Listen, the Blue Jays are in the thick of it right now, and everyone's wondering the same thing. Are we getting Bo Bichette back? Are we landing Kyle Tucker? Or somehow are we walking away with both? Jeff Passan dropped some intel that's got the entire fan base buzzing, and we need to break it down because this could define our entire offseason. So here's what Passan said that caught everyone's attention. He basically laid it out that Toronto has been one of the most aggressive teams throughout these winter meetings. We've already seen the moves, landing Dylan Cease, signing Cody Ponce. The front office is clearly trying to build something here, and Passan's take, the Blue Jays are almost guaranteed to land at least one of the big bats still available. But here's where it gets interesting. He didn't rule out the possibility of them getting both Tucker and Bichette. If that happens, Passan thinks we're immediately the favorites in the AL East. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that assessment. Think about what that lineup would look like for a second. You'd probably have Springer leading off, Tucker batting second, Vladdy in the 3-hole, and Bichette cleanup. Then you've got Kirk, Barger, Santander filling out the rest. That's an absolutely lethal lineup, and we haven't even mentioned Dalton Varsho yet. There's legitimate depth here if they can pull this off. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds too good to be true, right? And look, I'm not here to get everyone's hopes up to unrealistic levels. The chances of landing both guys, I'd still put it somewhere around 5 to 10%, maybe 15 if I'm being generous. It's not impossible, but it's also not the most likely scenario. This is a business, and even though the Blue Jays can technically afford both contracts, there are other factors at play. We're not talking about signing Shohei Ohtani here, someone who brings an entire country's fan base with him. Tucker and Bichette are elite players, but the marketing impact isn't quite the same level. But here's the thing. Just because it's unlikely doesn't mean it's off the table. And that's what has people excited. The fact that we're even having this conversation, that insiders like Passan aren't dismissing the possibility, that tells you something about how serious Toronto is right now. Let's talk about where things stand with each player individually, because that's really what matters. Kyle Tucker seems like the more realistic target at this point, and there's been smoke around this for weeks now. When you look at the market, a lot of teams have dropped out. The Yankees aren't seriously involved. The Giants have gone quiet. The Mets probably can't afford another massive contract after Soto. That really leaves Toronto and maybe Philadelphia as the main contenders. And here's something interesting. Reports came out recently that the Dodgers, who've been connected to Tucker, aren't willing to offer that 6 or 7 year deal he's probably looking for. They'd be open to a shorter-term, higher dollar per year contract, something in the 3 to 4 year range. But Tucker's only 28. This is his chance to secure generational wealth with a long-term deal. I don't think he's taking a 3-year contract when he could get 7 or 8 years elsewhere. That potentially takes LA out of the running, which only helps Toronto's chances. The Tucker fit makes so much sense for us. You slot him into that lineup, suddenly you can't pitch around Vladdy anymore. Tucker gets on base at an elite rate. He's got power, and he's still in his prime. Pairing him with Vladdy and potentially Bichette gives you one of the most dangerous middle-of-the-order combinations in baseball. And, Vladdy's been adding fuel to the fire on social media, dropping those eye emojis on Tucker's Instagram. Does that mean anything concrete? Probably not, but it shows Vladdy wants this to happen, and when your franchise player is openly recruiting, that matters. Now, on the Bo Bichette side, things have been weirdly quiet. We heard about the Zoom call with the Red Sox that apparently didn't go the way Boston hoped, but beyond that, there hasn't been a ton of concrete reporting. The market for Bo seems softer than a lot of people expected, and that's honestly surprising. This is a guy who was phenomenal in the playoffs, who's been a core piece of a roster that was one win away from the World Series. The offensive production is undeniable, but there are legitimate concerns, and teams are clearly weighing them. The defense is a question mark. Bo's not great at short, and as he ages, that's only going to become more of an issue. There are injury concerns, too, lower body stuff that's limited him in recent years. When you're talking about committing 7 years and over $200 million, those concerns matter. Teams are being cautious, and that might work in Toronto's favor if they want to bring him back. Here's where the contract term discussion gets really interesting. Bo was probably looking for that 7-year deal in the 200 to 220 million range. But with how the market's developed, I'm starting to wonder if he ends up taking something shorter with a higher annual value. Think about Alex Bregman's situation. He was supposed to get that massive long-term deal, and instead he took 3 years with player opt-outs. Maybe Bo looks at something similar, a 3 or 4 year deal where if he performs, he can hit the market again at 30 or 31 and get another payday. If it's a shorter deal, the annual value has to be high. We're probably talking north of 30 million per year, maybe 35 if it's only 3 years. That's the trade-off. Less security, but more money per season, with the flexibility to re-enter free agency if things go well. For Toronto, that could actually be more palatable than committing 7 years, especially with all the other money they've already allocated. The other name that keeps coming up in these discussions is Bregman himself. If the Blue Jays miss on both Tucker and Bichette, does Bregman become the fallback? He's a third baseman, which would push Barger to the outfield full-time. It's not a perfect fit, but it's better than walking away empty-handed. Losing Bo and not replacing that production somehow would be absolutely devastating for this roster. Because here's the reality. If we don't get Tucker or Bichette, this offseason becomes a disaster. I don't care what other moves you make around the edges. Losing your starting shortstop and not replacing him with another impact bat is a massive step backward. We'd be relying on massive breakouts from young guys or hoping Vladdy can carry the entire offense himself. And that's not a recipe for success in a division with the Yankees, Orioles, and Red Sox all trying to win. The winter meetings just wrapped up, and honestly, they were pretty underwhelming from a Blue Jays perspective. We didn't get any major signings, just rumors and speculation. Other teams were making moves, and we were stuck hearing the same stuff we've been hearing for weeks. There were those coaching hires, Drew Butera, Cody Atkinson, Eric Duncan, but those aren't the headlines fans were hoping for. The bullpen market is another area of concern that's flying a bit under the radar. Some of the top relief options are already off the board. Devin Williams, Robert Suarez, guys that would have been perfect fits are gone. There are still names out there, Pete Fairbanks, Luke Weaver, Tyler Rogers, but none of them are difference makers by themselves. If Weaver ends up being the big bullpen signing, that's not going to move the needle much. We need at least one more quality arm back there, especially with the volatility of bullpens. One thing I want to address, some people think just because we're not talking about this as a guaranteed thing, we're being too pessimistic. But setting realistic expectations isn't pessimism, it's being smart. Yes, the Blue Jays can afford both players financially. Yes, it would be incredible if it happened. But there are 30 teams in baseball, and free agency is unpredictable. Players have preferences about cities, team situations, contract structures that we don't always see. Acting like both signings are a done deal is setting yourself up for disappointment. That said, the fact that we're even in this conversation is significant. The Blue Jays have real shots at both these guys. The front office is being aggressive, and they clearly understand the window is now. Vladdy's extension kicks in, ceases here for multiple years. Gausman and Barrios are locked in. This is the time to go for it. If you're ever going to push your chips to the middle of the table, it's right now. Jeff Passan saying they'll get at least one of them carries weight. He's one of the most plugged-in reporters in baseball, and he doesn't throw stuff out there casually. If he's confident Toronto lands one of these bats, there's real substance behind that. Which one seems more likely? Right now, I'd lean Tucker. The fit makes sense. The market dynamics favor Toronto, and there's been consistent reporting connecting them. Bichette's situation feels murkier, and while I'd love to see him back, I'm less confident that happens. But imagine if both actually do sign here. Imagine that announcement dropping, Tucker and Bichette both coming to Toronto. The fan base would absolutely explode. We'd immediately be World Series contenders, and the excitement around this team would be off the charts. Opening day would sell out instantly, probably the first 30 games of the season. This is how you re-engage a fan base that's been burned before. And yes, we've been here before. The Shohei Ohtani saga, the flight tracking, all of that. The Juan Soto recruitment that ultimately ended with him in New York. Blue Jays fans have been through the disappointment cycle enough times that there's natural skepticism, but this feels different somehow. Maybe it's the playoff run, maybe it's the desperation of the situation with Bo potentially leaving, maybe it's just the sheer aggressiveness we're seeing from the front office. Something feels different this time. We're dropping down to 3 episodes a week starting next week since we're hitting the slow part of the offseason. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays will be the schedule. But if something breaks, if a signing happens, we'll be here immediately. We're not going anywhere. We're just acknowledging that GMs take time off around the holidays. Things slow down. But when stuff happens, you'll hear from us. The next few weeks are going to be critical. Tucker and Bichette won't stay on the market forever, and the Blue Jays need to close on at least one of them. The rotation is set. The lineup has pieces, but without another impact bat, especially if Bo leaves, this whole thing falls apart. Ross Atkins knows this, the front office knows this, and hopefully they're doing everything possible to make it happen. So where does this leave us? Cautiously optimistic with a healthy dose of realism. The Blue Jays are in the mix for two of the biggest names available. They've been aggressive, they have the resources, and the fit makes sense for both players. Will they get both? Probably not, but the possibility exists. Will they get at least one? If Passan's right, and he usually is, then yes, and that's enough to keep hope alive as we head deeper into this offseason.